Hi guys, it's Friday. I thought this week, following on from Zanny's video about the boycott that's happening at Exeter and everything, one thing I thought maybe we haven't talked about in massive detail yet is choosing a college to apply to. Whilst obviously there's no guarantee that you'll end up in the college you apply to, and whilst like for a lot of people making open offers is like their preferred choice, or like they're just not that bothered, I still thought maybe there's a few things that'll be useful to consider for the majority of people I've asked whose first choice was Mansfield. Their reasons for applying, like mine, were quite just sort of random really, which is fine. Like, I pretty much applied here because, well, I went to a grammar school, but I still kind of wanted to apply to one of the colleges that had a bit of a reputation for accepting more state school students, just because I thought maybe the environment would be a bit less stereotypically Oxford, which, you know, I now kind of realise that Oxford doesn't match up to the stereotypes that I thought it might do when I applied, but it was still something I was a little bit concerned about. But the only other reasons I chose Mansfield were I quite fancy going to a small college. I wanted to go somewhere that was near the centre of town and near the English faculty, because that way I didn't have to get up too early in the mornings, which are all good reasons to choose a college, but I just thought some other things you might want to bear in mind, so I've got a little list here. Number one, bear in mind that not all colleges cover all subjects. I know that probably most of the bigger colleges do most of the main subjects, but if you're thinking of applying somewhere like Mansfield, I think we only offer about 10 subjects, I think, and some of those are quite obscure ones. Number two, it might be useful to bear in mind that not all colleges provide 3 years worth of accommodation on-site or even off-site. There are a fair few colleges that do provide accommodation in college facilities for at least 3 years of your degree. Sometimes you have to spend 1 of those years, or maybe 2 of those years, in college-owned accommodation off-site. Here at Mansfield, everyone in their first year is guaranteed accommodation on-site, then second year everybody has to live out in private accommodation, so you have to take care of that yourselves, and then in third year you will either be put back in a room on-site or in a room off-site, but that will be, again, accommodation owned by college, unless you choose to live out in private accommodation, which you can do if you want to. The only reason why that might be something to bear in mind is because living in private accommodation off-site can be quite a lot more expensive. It is very expensive living out in Oxford. Average monthly rent can range from between like sort of 300 and 400-ish pounds, and then obviously on top of that you're going to have to pay for utilities and things. Although if you're doing a lot more cooking for yourselves, then I guess you can save money on food that way. It can be a bit of a hassle and a bit of a stress trying to find a group of people to live with, especially when it's in the first time of your university when you don't really know anyone. However, Owlsy do put together a very, very handy living out guide, and in our college anyway, the person in charge of accommodation, which is what I was last term, puts together like another living out guide and generally like sends out advice. There is help available for that kind of thing, so don't let it completely put you off. It's just something to bear in mind if it's an important thing to you. Positively, living out is actually really cool in that you get to see a completely different part of Oxford, because I think one of the most common complaints about Oxford is that you do get stuck in this little bubble, especially if you're in a small college and you don't get outside of Oxford very much during term time. You can go a little bit cabin fevery. It also means you get a taste of being a bit more independent, so some people prefer that. I quite enjoyed it. Number three, as already flagged up by Zanny, different colleges have completely different policies on hall and food and stuff. For some colleges you have to pay a catering charge. At Mansfield we don't, but we pay for stuff by bog card, which goes onto a termly bill, so you just pay for exactly what you eat. Some colleges I think do it on like a credit system, so you pay in advance a certain sum and then you can use that up during the term. Some colleges as well, like I know we do this, but if you do really well in your prelims, your first year exams, you get, I think it's a couple of £100 worth to spend on your battles, which basically means you can use it for food. We also have like 3 quite sizable kitchens here, on site, and kitchens in our off-site accommodation as well, so there's quite good kitchen facilities and quite a lot of people do tend to cook here, whereas at other colleges I know that people tend to use hall all the time just because it works out as being more cost and time effective if they're already having to pay a bit in advance. Number 4, facilities. I guess that probably also ties in with like the wealth of each college. There is quite a large disparity, I would say, in like how much money different colleges have, and thus like how many facilities and kind of fancy things that colleges have. We're pretty poor, so we basically don't really have anything. For me, that's not really like massively important. Like there's still a gym that you can use in Italy, which is not that far. Not that I really know what the inside of a gym looks like. I guess stuff like college bars, college societies, some colleges offer more than others, and if there's something you're particularly interested in, you might want to look at a college that has a lot of that kind of thing going on. But otherwise, you know, you can always set something up yourself. Bars wise, some college bars are just cheaper than others. Ours used to be pretty cheap until it got closed down for building works, which is sad, but it's being refurbished, so it's all fine. Some colleges have like massive grounds and stuff, which actually I think is probably the one thing that I really do envy of bigger colleges. All our stuff is very, very compact, which is nice. It does mean that sometimes it gets a little bit claustrophobic, but because we're really close to the centre of town, that again doesn't really matter. That brings me on to my next point, which is location. Some colleges are just closer to things than others. As I said, I applied here partly because I knew Mansfield was close to the centre of town. I didn't want to have to be trekking to get to my lectures or to my, well, just to anything really. Size of the college itself, so some people prefer a small college. That's kind of what I wanted, like where you get to know everyone a bit better. I guess disadvantages are it can be a bit claustrophobic and stuff, and some people prefer bigger colleges. There's maybe lots more going on, there's more space, lots of different groups of people, maybe more facilities and things. I guess disadvantages of that might be that you don't quite get that same community spirit or ethos maybe. And also some colleges, if they're a bit more modern, I think, like Mansfield, that was another thing I liked about it, is that they feel a bit more like sort of down to earth. They don't have quite as much, they're not quite as much steeped in tradition, which some people really like all the kind of traditions and things like that. My final point is stuff like grants and things. There are Oxford University bursaries that are offered to people regardless of college, but I think different colleges as well have their own kind of systems for bursaries and grants. So for example here, I know that we offer a termly academic grant to people who are just financially in need of money to buy books or whatever. If you need to stay for an extra week after the end of term to use the library, you can apply for the money to pay for your vacation residence. Basically always granted to whoever needs it, so that's really cool. Some colleges are a bit more focused on monetary rewards for people who do well academically. I don't know a huge deal about how these things work in other colleges, but I reckon if you look up individual college websites, there'll be information on there. I hope that's kind of useful. It's not something that you need to spend hours and hours deliberating over, but if you're just looking for ways to pick colleges, or if there's one of those things that's particularly important to you, it's just worth bearing it in mind. Whatever college you end up in, you will end up loving and being really loyal to, so don't worry too much about it. In other news, I've completed the first draft of my coursework now, which looks like this, and it's really long and needs lots of rewriting and things. I also had a class today, my last one ever for paper 6, at the end of which we were told that we all looked like we needed to go and have a good cry and eat some chocolate and feel better about life, because apparently we all looked really depressed and sad. So I think it's just that time of term. I'm thinking in 2 weeks' time of doing a video on positives, negatives video of like life in Oxford. If there's anything in particular that you want me to talk about, then leave it in the comments below. By the way, I just wanted to say to Rachel that Sweeney Todd was awesome. After we came out, I turned to my boyfriend and said, "Oh, well, that was great. I just don't think I'm ever going to be able to eat a meat pie again, though." To which he replied, "Well, that's probably okay, Abby, because you are vegetarian." It just goes to show that just because you go to Oxford doesn't mean that you don't say stupid things.